What's going on, folks? Welcome to another showing of the Geek Life, where everything in this life is geeky. Today we got a very special D&D episode for you, where we'll be discussing the importance of a session zero and just a few things that we think are important to do within a session in zero. So without further ado, let's cut to the chase and begin that session zero. So when
Get going.
So when it comes to session zero, it's always done before a campaign actually starts. Either Most of the time I heard that it is a standalone session by itself. Although depending on who you're playing with, like if it's a well-established group, you could potentially combine it with a little bit of the campaign, depending on how you do that. But that's usually only for like a well-established group. Can you pull that off? So, so with the session zero, so what what makes it so important to a game or a campaign of D&D? Um, to me, I feel like it really lays down the expectations of of the GM, the expectations of the players, what they expect from the campaign itself. Things like that. I think that those are probably the biggest things in my thought process. How about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the session zero is laying the foundation and the groundwork, and you set all the proper expectations and ground rules, and that's there's not really a better way to start anything, right? Whether it's a D&D game or any other type of activity, right? Have a session zero wherever you can, because it sets all that stuff, and lays it out for everybody so everybody starts on the same page.
Yep. Or for all of our agile IT friends of ours, think of it as like a sprint planning session.
Planning, yep. For a very long sprint.
Yep. For a sprint that looks more like waterfall instead of agile.
Very much so.
So, when it comes to session zero, let's take a look at some of the stuff that's usually involved with it. It's usually a session where everybody comes together, whether it's virtually or in person, um, and you really lay out first off what what are the expectations a GM has for the players, like treat each other with respect, being on time, things like that, and what are the expectations the players have for the GM? Will this be a fair campaign? Um, Stuff like that. Also laying out what type of campaign will it be? Will it be a gothic horror campaign like Curse of Strahd, or would it be more of a exploration type of campaign like the first half of Tomb of Annihilation? So just setting those expectations will definitely help players out, players and GMs out. In those examples, it would definitely help players out in terms of figuring out. I have some idea of what to expect. Now I know maybe some stuff to put in my backstory, or I was trying to decide between these two characters, but now I know some stuff about the story. I think this one character might be a little bit better. So just really going over that stuff is a tremendous help, and it doesn't have to be any long, drawn out 5 hour session. It could be as simple as a quick like 10-15 minutes.
I think that all depends on the experience level of the people you're playing with, right? And whether or not um, you need to help a few people get their character straightened out, or even create a character to begin with. Um, so depending on your play group, right, you can have a 10 or 15 minute session zero up to as you said, a 5 hour session zero if need be, right?
Yeah, exactly. And And of course, like you mentioned, depending on the skill sets of the or experience, I'm sorry, of the group, you could say, all right, we can do character creation there, or you could say, hey, you can come with some character concepts, and we'll hash out the and we'll finalize everything there. Which brings me to another point with character creation. Whenever you're coming to start playing the campaign with session zero, always come with at least two or three different character ideas. They don't all have to necessarily be fully fleshed out, but come with multiple character ideas just in case one or two of them doesn't work for whatever reason. Like maybe somebody else is playing the same character and you don't want to play the same character as somebody else, or maybe your character concept just doesn't work in a certain environment. Like for instance, playing a coastal land druid is probably not going to work in a desert sun campaign where you're seeing nothing but desert. So so having multiple ideas of characters that you want to play is definitely going to be useful.
Yes, very much so. I think kind of understanding the setting will help you make that choice for sure. It also will let the DM set his expectations about what kind of characters you want to bring to the table, and if need be, maybe tweak the setting a little bit or tweak the campaign to suit some of that stuff. Again, right goes right back to the idea of setting those expectations.
Yep, exactly. And there should there should always be some wiggle room on both sides of the road. I don't think either party should be too rigid with stuff. It's, like players shouldn't be, all right, I really want to play this character. I'm playing this character no matter what you say. And the GM shouldn't be like, all right, I'm playing this campaign. I'm not tweaking anything for players, type of thing. It shouldn't be that type of thing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and maybe session zero could also be a good time to really touch upon the points of last week's episode and really hammer home some what you're expecting with some of the pillars of the campaign. Maybe you're the type of player that loves a lot of combat. Maybe you're more of a political intrigue player. So really coming together and hashing all that stuff out will help players know if this is the campaign for them, help the GM know if they need to tweak anything with the campaign setting, and just knowing if the group can actually mesh together and play well together. Because if you have one person that all they want to do is combat, 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 and doesn't want to at least try out role playing, probably isn't going to mesh well with somebody that just wants to do role playing and no combat.
It's very true. Very true.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with being either of those players. It's more along the lines of setting those expectations. And if everything works well for everybody, great. You can go with session one. If not, all right, let's figure out maybe we need to split the party and run two separate campaigns or whatever the task may be.
Right. Gives you the opportunity to ask those questions on how to, if you know, if everybody can come together on at a specific time and day, and whether or not the campaign setting is suitable to everybody's play style, and if need be, you know, make potentially make that hard choice to have two campaigns going on, and find a, you know, another play group to kind of play with, right?
Mm-hmm. And and sometimes those can be the toughest choices, but sometimes everybody at the table might be very close friends and might love to do some stuff together, but as friends, you're not the same exact person, so you're bound not to like the same exact things.
Yeah, definitely. To, you know, we've got a bunch of friends that we play board games with once in a while, and there's definitely a wide variety of board games that can be played depending on who shows up that night, right? The same thing applies to D&D, right? Some people like the co-op games. Some people like the let me just do my own thing and and build out my board as you're building out your board at the exact same time. Some people like the Euro style games. Um, and depending on, like I said, depending on who shows up that night, sometimes you can do a co-op or you can't do that co-op. So, or you have to do the let me just develop my own board type of games. And so you got to be cognizant of that when you're in your session zero to make sure that you're paying not only the DM but the other players are paying attention to how the conversation is going and whether or not somebody feels like they're excited about what's being decided.
Yeah. And and also there's a very real possibility not everything is hashed out in the session zero. There may be something that comes up in session 10 or session 20 or something like that. So you have to have that talk with everybody saying, hey, if something comes up in the future, we got to make sure that we're reasonable adults or kids and go about it the right way.
Yeah, I think one of the best, if possible, one of the best things to make sure that you lay out in a session zero is the behavior for the table, right? And how you want to resolve conflict. Because things are going to come up, to your point, Nakai, things are going to come up in session 10, 15, 20, session 90, right? Months down the road, there could be something that comes up. And if you haven't set the proper expectation on how you want to resolve that months down the road, then people could just emotions could take hold and things could be said or done that weren't were inappropriate or weren't meant at the time, um, or it could cause strife at the table and other people at the table start not having fun. So being able to set that level of expectation on how you want to handle those situations, in a session zero and have that conversation, I think is extremely important.
Yeah. And while we're on that subject of behavior and everything, I think one of the biggest things that every group needs to talk about during session zero would be how do you deal with inappropriate topics? Every group has different things that will just not fly. Things like rape and violence and stuff like that. You got to know what you're dealing with, and there's two types of things like hard topics and soft topics, or hard limits, soft limits. It's like hard limits are things that are a definite no go. Soft limits are like, let's think about it. We may be able to skirt the line on this one, but it may not be a good idea, type of thing. But you got to know those boundaries around stuff like that.
You don't want to get in the middle of your campaign and start making a, a player feel singled out or uncomfortable because of the way that the campaign starts going, right?
Yeah,
You're as we've said the last few times, right? We're there to have fun. We're there to enjoy and relax and get away from the stresses of the world, right? So if you start bringing those types of things into the game, then it starts ruining the experience.
yeah. And, and also understand that sometimes you might not know that something is a hard limit for somebody because of personal fear or whatever it may be. So it would be great to maybe read those facial expressions. But also, if you're like the player, the GM that are facing that hard limit that you haven't really told anybody about, it's also good to maybe, if possible, raise the issue up then. If not, or if you feel more comfortable, maybe pulling the GM aside or what have you and say, look, this isn't a comfortable topic for me, and just have the knowledge to the know-how to go from there and say, all right, sorry that this has happened. I'm glad to know about this now. Let's move forward with trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again, type of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, Nakai. I think the player, if they're starting to feel uncomfortable, needs to have the courage to speak up, and that doesn't necessarily mean at the table in the moment, unless it's necessary. But feel confident and trust that the DM will listen to you. And on the flip side of that, the DM needs to make sure that they're instilling that trust and that confidence in the players that they can they can pull the DM aside and have that conversation if need be, right?
Yep. And then one of the other biggest things of a session zero is what homebrew or house rules are going to be in effect for that campaign. Because there's, I feel like, two different types of people. One group who are more so, I rather play rules as written or rules as intended type of folks, and other folks where it's like, yeah, having some rules is great, but I I kind of like it or prefer it or what have you if maybe like one or two of the rules or what have you were maybe changed a little bit. So just having those conversations are pretty useful. Like for me personally, I always like to tell my players that one rule I always change is the whole rounding system. Like, rules as written, you round down if there's a fraction. I'm like,
Right.
nah, math doesn't work like that in the real world. You round up if it's point 0.5 or more. So that's a house rule I always like to tell my players.
No floors in your life, huh?
Nope.
Only ceilings.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want them to be caught off guard or by surprise with a homebrew or house rule, right? You want to make sure those, whatever they are, whether it's rounding up or rounding down or a crit rule or how certain spells work, make sure that stuff is 100% discussed and laid out and maybe even reviewed it from time to time to make sure everybody remembers them. But session zero is where you want to start that conversation for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And at the same time, I'm not saying that every case will be ironed out in session zero. Because there'll definitely be a case where it's like, well, maybe somebody used cast this one spell that it's like, oh, that's how it works. I'm not a particular fan of it. All right, moving forward, let's rule it like this type of things. So you got to have that conversation with folks and say, if that comes up, this is how it's going to be done.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, the rules are there, but the GM has the final say on what flies and what doesn't fly. Just remember, GMs, the age-old saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
All right, Spider-Man.
Uh, I'm sorry, I just had to marvel at my saying there.
Oh, okay. Here, and the puns have started.
Yep.
Goodness.
So, so yeah, overall, for a lot of these reasons, Session Zero is definitely a must do for, I think, for every group, nonetheless, and
Yeah.
especially for newer players who might not know the ropes as well. It's a great way to start getting used to some of the rules and whatnot. You can have like a quick half an hour session afterwards, saying, "All right, let's run through like a very quick combat encounter or
Yep.
whatever," so you can start
Yep.
to really get that cohesion together with all the players.
I think that's actually a really interesting dimension on this. Is if you've got a mix of players that are experienced and not experienced, that are newbies to the game or newbies to you DMing them, it might make sense to split a session zero between the expectation settings where everybody's involved, and that might take 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and then the people that want to stay after or stay longer, you can run through a simulated combat or help them with their character creation or something like that, right? And not have to keep everybody around for that entire time, right? I think that's also a possibility on of making a session zero a little bit easier to manage and to make sure everybody has can spend the time that they need or want, making sure that they're comfortable for the beginning of the campaign.
Yeah, exactly. There's a group that starts off on the right foot with each other and knows each other's limits, expectations, how to have fun, all that stuff is likely a group that'll last.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I, I think one other big thing that needs to be considered during a session zero is make sure you discuss time and place and what happens if somebody can't make it, and those types of details, right? Me being a habitually late person, um, uh, sins on display here. Apparently, it's good to be able to to have that understanding and know, hey, day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, no good for me. Absolutely not. I've got X, Y, and Z thing. Thursday, can't do it until X time. Friday and Saturday are great, right? And be able to discuss those types of schedules, and once it's kind of when the schedule and the time is narrowed down and decided on, then figure out where, right? Is your house better? Is my house better? Is the library a better place, or the game shop is probably a better example there. A place that's accessible to everybody and make sure that everybody can easily make it to that centralized location, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes if you've got friends that you want to play with that are on the other side of town, that takes you an hour to get to, it's not always conducive to be able to get together every week or whatever the time frame is that you've decided on, which then opens you up to saying, well, maybe we should do this online or something like that.
Yeah. And then that's actually a good point. Like also to piggyback off of that, like the whole food situation is good too. Like just set that expectation of, hey, is one person going to take care of the food like this week, like the first week, another person the second week, type of thing, or does everybody bring some snacks or whatnot? So you got to have that expectation. So like two people don't bring Subway subs to the group on one day or something like that.
Everybody brings pizza. Now
Yeah.
we've got 6 pizzas.
Or it's like, oh, yeah, I brought this 12 pack of alcohol. Oh, sorry, John. I did not know you were a recovering alcoholic. I'm sorry about that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think discussing snacks and food is part of that expectation setting and good to do.
Yeah. So, so overall, I think those are a lot of the big, big money items for a session zero. Anything else on your mind for that?
No, I think we've covered a lot of the big points.
Yep. So, with that, folks, just remember session zero, first thing everybody should do, and make sure you do it. And if you're already in a campaign and you haven't done that already, have a session zero before the next session.
we, we all know that you start counting at zero and not at one anyway. So
Yep. Or at least all of our software developer viewers should know that. Start your arrays at zero. Well, that's another week, a fun-filled week of D&D, folks. And just remember, we'll see you here next week. Until next time, keep your life geeky.
bye.